Welcome back. This week we're going to work on Article 3 of the Constitution, and we're going to tackle one of my favorite branches of government, the judicial branch. Within this branch is obviously the Supreme Court, and we're going to tackle the Supreme Court by breaking down 4 judicial myths.
So the first one that we're going to talk about is this idea that the 3 branches are co-equal, or the sense that each one has the same level of power. Actually, whenever we look at the Federalist Papers, which were essentially documents that were written to explain the Constitution to people like you and I, the founders actually stated in number 51 that the legislative authority necessarily predominates. In the sense that the founders wanted this, they wanted the legislative branch to actually be the most powerful, purely because they are closest to the people. We elect them more often than we elect any other branch, so that actually shows why they wanted that one to be the most powerful. Now in Federalist number 78, they actually wrote that the judiciary is beyond comparison the weakest of the 3 departments of power. The general liberty of the people can never be endangered from that quarter. Now when we hear that, we think, well, look at us today. Actually, this shows just how prophetic and wise these individuals were. Because he goes on to say, I mean, so long as the judiciary remains truly distinct from both the legislative and the executive, liberty can have nothing to fear from judiciary alone, but would have everything to fear from its union with either of the other departments. What this is essentially saying is that if the judiciary branch begins to act like either other branch, rather than acting in its purpose, then it becomes a danger. Now we hear this and we're like, oh my gosh, that's terrifying. What checks do we have on this court? Well, quite a few. For one, the president gets to nominate those that go there. Not only that, but then Congress has to approve those that have been nominated to actually go to the Supreme Court. Not only that, but Congress actually creates all of the courts below the Supreme Court. So every single federal court can be both abolished and created by Congress itself. Not only that, but Congress can also actually take issues away from the courts if they believe that that's not in their jurisdiction to be deciding that. So all of these go together to actually show that the Founding Fathers did not believe in 3 equal branches, but actually outlined very specifically which branch should be the most powerful, which one should be in the middle, and that the judicial branch is actually the least powerful of any of the 3 branches. Now let's talk about the second myth.
So, transitioning into the second myth, a big reason why a lot of people presume the judicial branch to have more power than it actually does is because there's the myth that they will forever be there for their entire life. Now, for one, they have the right to recuse themselves. 2, there's actually a way for them to be impeached per se. So let's look at specific language from Article 3, Section 1. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior. Emphasis on good there. So there's grounds for impeachment, and these are just examples of grounds for impeachment in the past. It included drunkenness in private life, rudeness in the courtroom, profanity, judicial high-handedness, and even issued order with contradicting acts even in Congress. So we can see here that impeachment, which if you don't know what impeachment is, I don't know where you've been lately, but impeachment is something that can exist within the judicial branch as well.
So the third myth that actually a lot of people believe about the judicial branch is that its primary responsibility is to protect the minority from the majority. However, whenever we read the Declaration of Independence, it says such a thing as all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights. So the idea that we're protecting anyone's rights over someone else's, well, that's not what our founders ever envisioned. Not only that, but according to Washington and Jefferson, 2 founding fathers that probably had the most distinct political views of any other groups, they actually wrote together saying that the fundamental principle of our Constitution requires that the will of the majority shall prevail. And we can actually see examples of this where the judicial branch has been going against what the Founding Fathers wanted. We look at such things as gay marriage, where actually 72% of Americans are against the idea of gay marriage, yet the judicial branch voted in favor of the minority. We can see this in prayer in schools. 82% of Americans believe in some form of prayer in each and every school, yet the judicial branch voted in favor of banning prayer in schools. We can see that the idea of having the 10 Commandments in school, 76% of Americans are in favor of teaching the 10 Commandments in school, or at least having it where students can actually read it. Yet once again, the judicial branch voted against keeping those in school. And last but not least, saying under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. 90% of Americans believe that we should say that in our Pledge of Allegiance in our schools. Yet once again, the judicial branch decided to vote in favor of the minority rather than the majority of Americans. But the role of the judiciary, as I stated before, is to protect everyone's rights. And in fact, I should not be allowed to force my view on you, and you should not be allowed to force your view on me. That's kind of the idea of what America was founded on. It's not life, liberty, and the right to not get offended. It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is what America is about, and that is why this third myth has been officially busted. Now let's talk about the fourth.
The fourth myth. Only judges are capable of determining constitutionality, and their primary responsibility is judicial review. So we outlined judicial review a whole lot in Constitution Simplified, so be sure to follow along with that. But essentially what judicial review is the ability of the court to be able to check other branches or other actions of other branches of government and their constitutionality, essentially. So let's look specifically here at a quote that James Madison authored. The argument is that the legislature itself has no right to expound the Constitution. That whenever its meaning is doubtful, you must leave it to take its course until the judiciary is called upon. To declare its meaning, I beg to know upon what principle it can be contended that any one department draws from the Constitution greater powers than another in marking out constitutionality, and that's a question there. So each branch has a voice, and it's silly to wait on the Supreme Court. We know that there are other branches of government that have other capabilities to check on constitutionality. So in theory, let's just take Roe v. Wade, for example. We know that Roe v. Wade was something that the Supreme Court issued. Now, if Congress ever wants to write a law to contradict that, it certainly can. And the president could, sign that into law. So there's different ways that, we could go around the Supreme Court to rule other things as constitutional or unconstitutional. But the Supreme Court is there, and it has that responsibility of judicial review, which was granted. But something that is very interesting to note is it's not a power that's given by the Constitution. It's a power that was given after a case, which again is going to be a little bit more explained in your Constitution Simplified. But with that being said, the Constitution is a very intentional document that explains to the T what the role and the powers are to be of each branch of government. Now, we're still going to hit on the rest of the articles of the Constitution, but let's go ahead and take a pause here and really reflect on the three branches of government that were outlined and its powers, and see if you can find any powers that don't necessarily line up with what's written in the Constitution. Thank you so much for watching Article 3. Tune in next time for Articles 4 through 7.